Waiting room disabled. All righty, we are ready to get started. Welcome everybody to Becoming Pro Artists. We are here with Jesse Winchester Schmidt, and we're just really excited. We're excited that you've spared some of your time to be with us. This is an interview series for artists who are in the process of becoming professional artists, to learn from those who have been there before, so they can kind of hear what their process was, what their stories are, tips, whatever it is that's going on in their lives, just for inspiration and encouragement. So welcome, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Why don't you tell me just a little bit about kind of who you are, what you're working on just right now?
Sure thing. Yeah. So my name is Jesse Winchester Schmidt. I'm so grateful to have been working as a pro artist for 16, 17 years, something like that. And I work in animation. I'm currently art directing a CG series for Disney, which will be on Disney Plus in about 3 weeks. And I've been art directing for about a decade now. I enjoy it tremendously. My online presence is primarily me sharing my plein air paintings, which has really become a big passion and a very personal component of my artistry, which is kind of separate from my professional life, but it's a wonderful balance. And it actually came from working in animation. I really liked doing color keys, which is designing the light and color for animated sequences. And I wasn't very good at it. And I had a great art director at the time, Boris Andreev, who was trained in Russia in the wonderful fine art academies there. And he suggested at the time that I go outside and paint. And that was about 12 years ago. And so I took his advice, and I was terrible, but I loved it. I grew up hiking and camping and being outdoors a lot. I live in Vancouver, Canada, and our scenery is very beautiful here. So it was this perfect balance of being outside in nature and connecting with nature and practicing my artistry. And so initially I started to do that stuff to increase my understanding of lighting and color for the sake of animation color keys. But then quickly it really grew into something very personal, where that is my sacred special time that is just for me. And it's not with commercial intent, and it's a place where my artist soul recharges, and I enjoy it very much. So that's the majority of the work that I post online are quick gouache sketches that I do outside.
Yeah, Emma, could you maybe share a little bit some of those sketches? So when I was going through your work, I really appreciated your design, your frame. I felt like every time you had just a slight, like a unique frame to your plein air sketches, which that's one of the challenging bits, right? Is like looking at this huge landscape and condensing it to a square. Do you think that your the work that you do digitally, do you think that has informed that process at all? Do you think that has helped that?
Oh, that's super cool. Thank you. Yeah, I think so. I think my work in film certainly guides how I look at composition. So I spend so much time doing narrative image making that definitely drives my sensibilities. So I'm always thinking about, what is the story here? What is the focal point? How do I ensure that is of most importance or most impact to the audience? And how do I then support that with its supporting cast? I study film a lot. I love looking at live action film and studying how they work with composition. Filmmakers and cinematographers like Roger Deakins are really inspiring to me. And I love how they'll often be a central point of interest, but there's also elements within the frame that support and or counterbalance that focal point, and that is really fun to play with. And just as you mentioned, that it is a natural challenge in plein air that once you get out there and you find something inspiring, that it's almost overwhelming. I paint a lot in the forest and canyons, and there's just so much visual interest everywhere. It really does require one to decide, what is this about? And it's really easy to get carried away and say, oh, this is about that particular stump. Oh, and that rock. Oh, and that lighting. Oh, and the creek. Oh, and that far tree is really cool. And if you allow everything to creep into importance, it can actually de-emphasize or hurt your storytelling. I think it was Nathan Folks who said, if you emphasize everything, you've emphasized nothing.
Right.
And that's a really powerful tool to use. So that's awesome that you picked up on that.
Yeah. So I am also curious. I have noticed that a number of artists started out in digital art, and they started out in the entertainment industry. And I'm kind of curious, what was it like when you decided you wanted to be an artist, and what was your education kind of leading up to that? And is this what you planned? Is this like kind of what you thought? Like, yeah, I want to be an artist and I'm gonna work on movies and I'm gonna, yeah.
Great question. Yeah. So yes and no. At a young age, I fully committed to pursuing art, and in particular animation. I knew I wanted to draw and paint for a living, and I decided that in high school. And I knew that I wanted to build a sort of a trade skill set, rather than, for me, that felt good to have a trade or a skill set that was employable in an industry versus just going straight fine art. For me, that was the way to go. And my older brother at the time knew someone who worked in animation, and we got a hold of him and asked about schooling, and he gave me a lot of great insights. And so I ended up going to Sheridan College on the other side of Canada in Ontario. And so at the tender age of 19, I moved out of my parents' home and moved across the country. I had saved up money for a year working full time, and was able to save up for my tuition and made the big plunge. So I knew I wanted to pursue animation. When I started Sheridan in 2000, Finding Nemo had just come out, or was it just about to come out? So there had been Toy Story 1, but really we didn't know at that point how big the CG revolution was about to become in animation. And I was enrolled in classic animation, or pencil hand drawn. And I'm glad I did. Although those next 4 years were a little nerve-wracking in that all of our graduates were coming back and saying, hey, classical animation's dead. You have to learn Maya. You have to learn 3D. That's the only work out there. And so there was a lot of change happening in the industry, which I think is even more so now with AI and all of the technology advancement happening in every industry. And so it forced all of us to adapt. And it took me a bit of time to figure out, but within a year or two of working, I realized, hey, CG or 2D, they all have an art department, and that's where I want to be. I want to be designing, and in any art department, you'll have designing for characters and props and environments and lighting as well. And so even just within that skill set of being an animation designer, there's quite a few different areas of expertise. And so it took me a while to figure that out. My instructors, when I was in college, didn't really know what was happening with the quickly changing industry. And it kind of took me some time to get to physically enter animation studios, walk around and be like, oh, what's that group of people in the corner all drawing? I want to be like those people. And they're like, oh, that's our art department. It's like, yes, that's where I want to be. And so over the first couple of years of my career, it then crystallized and became very clear that art departments were where I wanted to spend time. And then over the years, ended up moving into the AD role and taking on more leadership.
Okay, so I too moved across the country when I was at a tender age. And so I just want to empathize with what you went through. That is really scary. 18, 19 is really young. I think we forget how
It
young it
is.
is. I'm curious to know though, um, having taken a huge plunge from childhood to adulthood, and it involves this dream that you're trying to kind of weave for yourself. Do you think that initial investment of almost that initial, almost like pain of like leaving home, I'm going to do this, I saved all this money. Do you think that that kind of put any energy into your career or the development of your career that maybe wouldn't have been there if maybe your parents had been next door the whole time?
1,000%. Yes. In my early years of both education and career, I had a lot of negative motivation, which is extremely powerful.
Hmm.
And I think negative motivation can be harnessed for really good things. And by that, I mean, what was compelling me wasn't, it was partly what I wanted. I wanted to be an artist, but I had a lot of really big feelings about not wanting to fail, not wanting to return home with my tail between my legs,
Yeah.
not wanting to disappoint my parents and my friends as
Yeah.
well. So I had this really strong urge in me to do whatever it took to make that happen. And I put myself in a position where I just didn't have an option. I was going to keep drawing until I starved to death or not. And fortunately I did not. It came close,
Success
but
or
I did
death.
not. Yeah. Yeah, basically. Yeah. And
That's
there
crazy.
was, I wouldn't recommend that for everyone, but
Right.
as a very young man who was willing to be poor and to eat yams for a year straight, it was really beneficial for
That's
me.
healthy.
It
Healthy choice
definitely,
though.
I think so. Yeah, yam. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a lot of good nutrients in yams. They're cheap and delicious.
absolutely. Good choice. Okay, so I'm wondering a little bit if you can share some of what your inspirations are. I know you talked about nature. I know you talked about hiking being a big part of your childhood. What else kind of inspired you in those younger years, or even in these more mature years as you're in it, you're doing it now, but you know, what keeps you going?
Sure. Yeah, nature is a big one for sure. Connection to nature is a big one. Film is another big one. I love animation, but I really love great live action film as well. The value of storytelling to me is so important to humanity. I think storytelling is really the most effective tool we have at cultivating healthy ethics and morality in such a way that doesn't have to be preachy. Just telling a story where there is a protagonist and an antagonist and conflict and drama, be it comedy or otherwise, allows the audience to decide for themselves, hey, that villain's not a very nice person. I don't want to be like that. Or like, hey, I really like how the protagonist is handling that, or not. And so by presenting effective storytelling, we're giving humanity an opportunity to reflect upon what it is to be human. And to me, that's so special. And storytelling has been really central to every culture, I think, ever, and is a way that we pass on our traditions and our ethics and our values, in a way that doesn't have to be as heavy-handed as don't do this or do that. So big fan of storytelling. And I'm a big fan of being an audience member and watching a great film that takes me to another world. Or I love films that allow me to empathize and connect with people that are different than I. Um, I love the film Moonlight, and I am so moved and struck by how much I relate to the protagonist, who in many ways couldn't be any more different than me. But at the end of the day, it's a human story. And every time I watch that film, I just feel so compelled by the struggles of the lead character. And I empathize with that humanity. And in that regard, it makes me feel more connected to people and emphasizes that our differences are maybe not as broad of a gap as they could be perceived. So that's very inspiring to me. Effective storytelling, character driven storytelling. Yeah. And I think people are a constant source of inspiration to me. Meeting people, learning people's stories, and understanding what people find challenging and what people find important in this lifetime, and allowing that to inform my role in storytelling in my profession is a huge source of inspiration to me.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned people. I don't know if I've ever heard any of our artists yet say that people is an inspiration for their art. I think, we've heard the nature a lot. That's a big one. We're all deeply inspired by nature, but yeah, that's really neat. And I agree, the stories that we have, they really do. They are really, yeah. And I like how you said that you really enjoy the thought of being able to influence humanity positively with the films that you participate in. I think that's really, um, yeah, that's a big one. So I am your dad. Do you have two daughters? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you manage a work-life balance as an artist? How do you do that?
Barely. Yeah. So I am so blessed to be a dad. It is the most amazing experience I will ever have, I'm sure. The most meaningful experience. Our daughters are 4 and 2 years old. So I'm still pretty early in the chapters of parenting. It is so challenging for sure.
Mhm.
My priorities and my values have shifted tremendously since becoming a parent. It's interesting to me that I don't feel art is any less important. It's not that that value or that priority in itself has been lowered. I still care about art as much as I did before. However, this new priority has entered my life, which is infinitely more important than anything else. And it does end up taking over my priorities. So there's a dad, Jesse, who's very fulfilled, and I value my deep connection with our daughters so much. And then there's artist Jesse, who struggles to find time for art, for personal art in particular. And it's a little stressful and a little bit sad at times that I get less time for my art than I did when I wasn't a parent. That being said, I bring more feeling into the experience of creating art now. And there's also a greater sense of urgency and almost like a feeling of like art time is sacred time. Whereas before having kids, I'd have all this time to do art. I got all weekend, I could sketch and like, I'll watch YouTube for a bit and like, oh, I'm going to go do this for a bit. I'll come back and do a little bit more sketching. And there was a casual, organic feeling. I was always very disciplined and very hardworking, but certainly I could afford to be a little less regimented with my art time. Whereas now it's like, oh, I've got 15 minutes of art time this week. Let's make it count. So I'll be thinking about how I want to leverage that time as best as possible. And that's a good thing, I think, in the long run. And from what I hear, as our children get older, you gain some of that time back. And
You sure do.
the artist in me looks forward to that, and the dad in me thinks, oh, I hope they never grow up. And I just cherish every moment with these little toddlers.
Yeah. And I know from personal experience, just on a hopeful note, I feel like that personal time starts to creep in at the age of 6.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm not
you're
far
not
off.
too far away. Yeah, you've got like 4 years of crazy. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, look at that. I can garden now.
That's great. And I feel like I've had to increase my efficiency and how I leverage my time. So if my schedule does open up, my goal would be to then pay that forward and make better use of that gained time, and
Yeah.
maybe just have a little bit more passionate vision as to how I want to spend my time. It becomes
Yeah.
very apparent when you have very little time that how we spend our time is of great importance, for sure.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So I would like to talk a little bit about your painting process, which you call clarity of intent. Is that correct?
Ooh, yeah.
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 So why don't you describe to me a little? Oh, wait, really quick. Actually, I really quickly want to ask, do you take your girls' plein air painting with you? Do they go?
So not officially yet. We do paint together. We draw and paint every day together.
Okay.
They love art. Particularly our oldest is very into drawing and painting. I've taken them to some of my plein air spots, although a lot of them are pretty dangerous and not
Yeah.
friendly towards toddlers.
Yes.
I absolutely will nurture that if they should be interested
Yeah.
as they get older.
Emma and I have chatted about how some of the moms who plein air paint, some of them have like well-behaved, very like well-contained toddlers who like just kind of sit and join, whereas some of them have crazy toddlers who cannot, will not, they just are everywhere. So it depends on the kids. Okay, but
Absolutely.
back to clarity of intent. Describe that process to me. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yay, I am so excited to talk about this idea, clarity of intent. I think it's one of the most valuable and powerful concepts that I have learned about in my career. And I'm so excited to share it because I think it is so empowering, can help supercharge every artist out there, which I would be thrilled if this idea helps any of you. So this came out of struggling with my skill level, as I think all artists can relate, as well as adapting to the animation industry where the outcome and the goals are very specific. It's not like you show up to work and say, oh, I feel like drawing a fairy today. No, the script is defining exactly what you're drawing today and how the audience should feel about it. So it's very targeted type of artwork. And so out of the the ongoing feeling of never really being satisfied with my skill level, always thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I was just a little bit better or a lot better at whatever it is, drawing or painting or character design or perspective. That feeling is always there. And I do really believe in the importance of training in the same way that a athlete does, of having focused exercises that target the specific skill set that we want to elevate. So I totally believe in that. And at the same time, every artist that I know struggles with the feeling of like, am I good enough? I wish I was a little bit better in skill. And so I came across this concept of clarity of intent, and it really kind of liberated me from that anxiety. Dice Tatsumi, ex-art director at Pixar, now co-founder of Tonko House, wonderful artist, wonderful person and human being, said something along the lines of, as artists, we're not striving for perfection, but rather feeling. And that was, I think, the first time that it started to really solidify in my head. So what it is art is powerful when it has a big emotional or psychological impact on the audience. And as artists, we can identify and commit to what that impact is for any drawing or painting or piece of animation. And if we can be clear about that and really feel it in our hearts to where it's visceral, and say I'm painting a dappled light little cabin in the woods.
Mm.
Why am I painting it? Well, on this particular day, it was a beautiful summer day, and the leaves were gently swaying in the wind, and the way that the dappled light was dancing across the pathway leading to the cabin, it felt very peaceful and very inviting, as if the scene was pulling me into the path towards the cabin. And so I'm describing it objectively, but what I hope I'm conveying is the feeling of what it was to be there. And when I could identify that intent with clarity, then all of a sudden my job as an artist becomes a lot easier. And whatever skill level I'm at, whether I'm absolutely beginner just starting out or a seasoned professional, if I know exactly what it is I'm going for, then every decision in that process can be evaluated against that goal. So maybe there was a signpost in the side of this scene. I can ask myself, is that helping the goal of what this is about, or is it taking away from that? And if I go through the process of my image making, evaluating every decision against that clarity of intent, all of a sudden the impact that image will have on the audience has been magnified greatly. And so it's a way to create powerful images regardless of skill level. Even a child can identify or feel something that we can then talk about and say, let's make a drawing that is exploring this feeling that you're having. So wherever we are, we have the option to decide what our image and what the feeling really is about. And with that comes great liberty. All of a sudden, it feels like I'm not so much struggling to be better than I am, but rather I have a goal in target. And even if my perspective isn't as strong as it could be, or even if my anatomy or my structure isn't as strong, I'm still able to convey that feeling with effectively, so that when the audience looks or experiences the image, what their experience is what I had intended the experience to be. And that's just such a powerful and liberating idea. In plein air painting, of course, one of the big challenges is time. Lighting changes every 20 minutes or so, depending on what the clouds are doing, or what the lighting and the weather is doing that day. And so that clarity of intent really helps to execute a sketch quickly and effectively, so that in the small amount of time, rather than getting caught up in the millions of details that could be in the picture, I know what it is I'm going for, and therefore can pick and choose what supports that storytelling. And so the notion of clarity of intent has become very helpful in my animation work, in that it helps to convey the idea and feeling of any given scene with potency. And it also helps me to plein air paint in such a way where it can be impactful, even if it's just a little 20-minute sketch or so. And those two disciplines kind of cross-pollinate each other. And I think whether you're an illustrator or an animation designer or a fine artist who's painting canvases, to take some time and really find what feeling and what idea your image is really about is going to be a huge payoff for you in the resulting image and the process of creating that image, because it then becomes so much more emotional and engaging and personal as to how we approach the image.
You know, when I was in high school, just to support what you're saying, I never would have said that this is what you're saying. I never would have guessed that this is what you're talking about previous to this moment, but I'm realizing this is what was going on. A friend of mine and I both created pieces of art, and I really would have thought that I was the better artist. Like I really thought I was a better artist than this guy. But he created like an angry robot, and he did some fancy things with the color red that was coming up from underneath. And his robot, though he was a terrible artist and his robot shape was really odd, his like clarity of intent, I'm guessing that must have been what it was, came up through the robot, through his colors and the way he did things. It was amazing. The end result was a clear like applause for him. So I can see how that really works out. And mine was really weak sauce. Mine really wasn't very good. So I probably didn't have very good clarity of intent.
Well, there's that inner critic I'm very familiar with, Julie. Yeah, it's so interesting to evaluate why some images resonate with people, and it's not always which image is executed with the most amount of skill.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah. 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 Well, I just love that. And I did want to ask you, with all the things that we've talked about today, I was curious to know, do you have any plans for your future in terms of like a change of direction? Like, are you really pleased with where you are working right now? And this is kind of how you really like to see your future going in the art world? Or do you have any like maybe hopes for some changes in the future?
Oh, good question. Very good one. I've been reflecting on this a lot. I am very content with where I am at my career. I've definitely gotten to a place that is very exciting. I feel very fortunate to work with the people that I do on the projects that I do work on. It's very fulfilling. It's very exciting. I definitely want more of that. I am certainly focusing on specific goals within my animation career that will help advance me forward. I just want to work on really awesome projects with really awesome people. Particularly at the end of my career, I want a couple notches on my belt where I've worked on what will or have become really classic pieces of film, stories that generations of people will come back to because that particular story resonates in a timeless way that offers entertainment and value and introspection to people for ages to come. That's definitely a goal moving forward. And I would like to spend more time plein air painting in the years to come for sure. I really question whether or not I'd want to monetize my plein air painting. And I flip-flop on this. On some days I feel like I really appreciate that I make good money as an art director, but then I have this personal endeavor on the side that is free from the intention of money making. And it's just so pure. And when I'm out there in the canyon, there's just no motivation inside of me of, is this going to sell or what do people like? And I really consciously let go of any expectation for online reception to that work. Sometimes that creeps in there. I catch myself thinking, oh, wait till people see this. This is a good one. And inevitably, as soon as I start thinking that, it dive bombs. Like my process goes downhill. Whereas if I'm fully immersed in the experience of like, wow, this waterfall is amazing, and the full hour that I'm sketching it is just me being present and connected with that time and place and reflecting on that experience in the paint, inevitably the results would be better. So I wonder if making a living or commercializing that endeavor would somehow take away from that experience. And I don't know. Some days I feel like it would. And then other days I think, if I was able to build up enough of an audience and I was able to just go out there without and let go of those expectations and just paint whatever I want to paint, and somehow there's enough of an audience there to sell those paintings and make a living from it. I mean, that sounds pretty darn good too.
Yeah.
So I think about it a lot. Maybe someday. I'm definitely not done with animation. I could get down with a little more balance between the two. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that'll come when the kids are a little older too. Who knows?
Yeah.
Do you have any
Exactly.
classic movies that you like kind of have in mind when you talk about these kind of classic movies that you'd like to participate in? Do you have any that you have seen that you're like, okay, like that's the movie that I'd love to?
Oh, yeah, there's so many. I'm a big Coen Brothers fan for sure. And actually their recent one, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs on Netflix. I love the storytelling in that. It's quirky yet relatable. Like all the characters are so weird, yet I relate to them, and I love that.
I love that.
I'm such a sucker for weird characters. And then the cinematography in that one is absolutely incredible. Like every single shot in that film is masterful in its composition and its lighting. Roger Deakins has an amazing website where if you sign up to be a member, which is totally free, he shares his production notes on every movie, and he fills sketchbooks of before they shoot any scene. He's already figured out lighting direction, where the key light is, where the fill light is, and he's diagrammed it all out. And it's all from a very conscientious storytelling perspective. And I love that stuff. I eat it up. So yeah, any Coen Brothers films, big fan of for sure. Scorsese films, big fan of. All the classic stuff, really.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. And when you talk about monetizing plein air paintings, are you talking specifically about maybe working for galleries? And would that still be in gouache? Would you switch to oils? Would you do some of both? Kind of like, what would that possibility look like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've thought about that quite a bit. I think, to me, if I was to go down that route, I think it would be about building multiple streams of income.
Oh yeah.
So selling originals both online and through galleries. And for originals, I understand size is a big factor in the value of a painting. So, my friends that do it full time, it's like you go out and do field sketches and then come back to the studio and then create bigger works based on your plein air paintings. And I think that format is really effective. And then I think coupling that with print sales and probably online courses and in-person workshops, and having all of those happening and selling books and having multiple streams of income, I think is the way to go there. And I think we're very lucky these days to have the internet and just the endless formats and opportunities that we can monetize our audience and our artwork in a way that is genuine and is offering real value to the people who do enjoy our work.
Yeah, it really are. I sometimes think about the resources that artists who came before us used compared to the resources we have today. And I just think, gosh, they had to push through, like the boundaries that they had to push through, and like having hope and trust in their abilities in a silent world, really. Whereas now we just have noise. We can access any noise for anything.
Yeah. Pros and cons to each, I think. And I think a lot about that noise. And I think the noise can be quite dangerous if we let it impact us in any way other than being helpful, which for me at times it has. Listening to or paying close attention to comments on our work online, or doing it for that reason, can for me end up being pretty demotivating in the long run. So yeah, it's important for each of us to find a way to navigate the noise and the online world in a way that is conducive and advantageous to our values and our goals.
Yeah, that's true. I have a final question for you. And it is, how would you describe your success? Like, what for you is the ultimate success as an artist? How would you describe that?
Great question. Really good question. It's such an important question for all of us to reflect on. I know that it's not what people would have me believe. Our world and the culture we live in leans very heavily towards materialism and capitalism. And money is important for sure, especially if you don't have it. It's very important because then it impacts your well-being and your family's well-being. From what I know, what I'm looking for and what I'm after is a meaningful experience. And so then I have to define what meaningfulness is. And to me, it is an experience that is deeply valuable and often involves people I care about. And I see that meaningfulness is coupled with difficulty and challenge, because if you take difficulty out of the equation, meaningfulness becomes fun or entertainment. And I like fun and entertainment. I like watching movies, although I do find them meaningful. I like riding on a roller coaster. I like eating a donut. These are fun things that I enjoy, but they're easy. And the payoff is proportionate to how easy it was to acquire that donut. Whereas it took me 10 plus years of working super hard and overcoming self-doubt and being very driven, even when it seemed like the odds were against me. It took all that effort and difficulty to get to a place where exciting opportunities approach me and I get to work with really awesome people and really awesome things. Therefore, all that difficulty and challenge that was a part of that story then contributes to the meaningfulness of the result. So there's a price tag on the meaningfulness. It doesn't come easy, it doesn't come cheap, and the difficulty involved is proportionate to the meaningfulness. The harder something is, if it is true to my heart, the more meaningful it is. So I want to look back on life and know and experience that I've had a very meaningful journey as an artist and as a father and a friend and husband.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Jesse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now to, I don't want to change this to a totally different note because that was so beautiful, but I do want to make sure we talk about your Gumroad course.
Sure.
Okay, just let us know what it is and what we would need to know if we wanted to look for it.
Sure, yeah. So I think we'll share a link. It is a 1-hour crash course in gouache plein air painting. I think it's called painting relationships rather than objects. I made it a year or two ago for Lightbox Expo, and it's been very well received. I spent a lot of time making this 1-hour demo. I think I put 40 hours of work into making what I believe is the most intense and targeted 1 hour to help you get plein air painting with gouache. Gouache is so fun. I love it, but it's got a learning curve. The big one is that the values dry different than they are when they're wet. So your darkest darks don't end up being as dark, and your lightest lights don't end up being as light. And it's so frustrating at first. It took me years to get over that. For the most part, I'm totally comfortable with that now, and I'm not wrestling with that when I am working in gouache. So I've gotten over that hump, although it took me years. And I do believe that having been through that, I can now offer very specific methods and exercises to get you there quicker. I think with the right exercises, you could get over that in a couple months, whereas it took me a couple years. And so really what I hope is that it just helps people get to the fun part where they're expressing their feeling and their ideas about what they're observing, rather than struggling with the medium of gouache. So I hope it's very helpful. I do take the viewers into Cypress Falls Canyon on the North Shore of Vancouver in the demo. So I'm like walking through waist deep water and painting waterfalls. It's quite an adventure, and I hope you all enjoy. And it's inexpensive. I think it's $10 or something. It's cheap.
Oh yeah, we like affordable here. We like that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. I'm just so grateful you spent time with us today. We've learned so much about your approach and how you kind of went about doing things and your journey, and just we're grateful to you. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And I would like to offer to everyone listening that even though I might not know you, even though I might not have seen your portfolio or your work, I know with absolute certainty that you are capable of excellence. You just got to put in the work, keep doing what you're doing, keep creating. And I would love to see the greatest success for each of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jesse. Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Have a
See
great
ya.
day.